What if I told you that doing poorly in school might actually be the very first step that leads you to real success? Think about it. Our whole lives we've been taught that grades decide a person's worth. Those with high scores are considered smart. Those who stumble are seen as failures. But deep down, you and I both know life is far more complicated than that. Some people spend their entire youth chasing a career they don't even love, just because their parents told them to, or because society said that's the right path. And then there are those moments we've all experienced. Maybe I'm not good at anything, maybe I'll never really make it. But here's the real question: if you never listen to that voice inside yourself, will you ever find success that actually brings happiness? Today's story is about a young man named Jake. Jake wasn't a troublemaker. On the contrary, he was energetic, curious, and always eager to explore. But there was one thing he could never fit in with: school. No subject ever sparked his interest. No class ever made him want to try harder. While his friends were busy preparing for college, Jake stood there, lost, wondering if there was even a place for him in this world. But his father, Robert, a man respected throughout the entire town and mysteriously known as the man with the golden leg, saw things differently. He didn't scold Jake, nor did he force him. Instead, he gave his son a strange task. Go meet 3 of my old friends. Tell them you are the son of the man with the golden leg. Then ask them what is true success. Their answers will help you find what you're searching for. Jake didn't really understand what his father meant, nor did he know why people gave him that strange nickname. But one thing was certain. For the first time in months, a spark of curiosity lit up inside Jake. Maybe this journey would open a different path for him. And so, with a small piece of paper listing 3 names and his father's words echoing in his mind, Jake set out on the journey that would change his life. But before you hear the rest of Jake's story, ask yourself this: what does success mean to you? Is it money, fame, recognition, or is it something deeper? Because by the end of this journey, you may realize that the key to your future has already been within you all along. Jake lived in a quiet little town where everyone knew each other, and stories were passed down from generation to generation during evenings around the fire. He grew up in abundance. His family owned a vast horse ranch with green pastures stretching as far as the eye could see. His father, Robert, was admired by many. He wasn't just wealthy, but also wise, calm, and carried with him a story that gave him a name the entire town would never forget: the man with the golden leg. And yet, despite everything he had, Jake didn't feel happy. There was always this quiet restlessness deep inside him. At school, Jake never stood out. While his classmates were excitedly preparing for college entrance exams, sending out applications to prestigious universities, Jake felt like he didn't belong there. Every class felt like torture: numbers, formulas, and endless lectures that sparked absolutely no interest in him. Jake had tried. He spent hours in front of his books, forcing himself to memorize passage after passage, definition after definition, but the harder he tried, the more exhausted he became. Every time he looked at his grades, Jake felt like a failure. Maybe I'm really not good at anything. Maybe I'll always fall behind my friends, he told himself on those sleepless nights. Meanwhile, everyone around him couldn't stop talking about success. His friends bragged about their high scores, parents proudly showed off their kids, and neighbors gossiped about those who had been accepted into elite universities. Jake was different. He had nothing to brag about, no achievements to be proud of. The pressure kept building, and he started to believe he had no place in society. The irony was, Jake was full of energy outside the classroom. He could spend an entire day working on the ranch, taking care of the horses, cleaning the stables, or riding freely across the fields. Out there, he felt alive and happy, but he never dared to think that those things could actually be his future. In his mind, success had to come from school, from grades, from diplomas hanging on a wall. That contradiction ate at him every day. On one hand, He longed to discover his true passion. On the other hand, he was terrified that if he went against the path everyone else was following, he would end up a failure. And so, Jake slowly pulled away. From a cheerful, lively boy, he turned into a quiet young man, often sitting alone for hours, lost in thought. In the evenings, when the family gathered around the dinner table, Jake often stayed silent. He listened to his parents talking, listened to his younger sister chatter about school, but inside there was only emptiness. Many times he wanted to admit that he didn't want to study anymore, that he couldn't find any meaning in numbers and lectures. But he kept quiet, afraid of letting his parents down. Until one day, Jake couldn't hide it any longer. While working on the ranch with his father, the words suddenly slipped out. "Dad, I don't want to study anymore. I'm not good at it, and I don't even know what I really want." At that moment, Jake felt like the entire weight of the world was crushing him. He was terrified that his father would be angry, disappointed, or worse, see him as the family's disgrace. But instead of scolding him, his father just smiled. It wasn't a mocking smile, nor one of judgment, but a smile full of understanding. And right then, Jake's life began to take a completely different turn. Because instead of forcing his son back onto the old path, Robert gave Jake a mission, a journey that would change everything. After his confession in the ranch, Jake thought things were about to get worse. He braced himself for scolding, for another long lecture about discipline and responsibility. But what surprised him was Robert's reaction. His father didn't look disappointed, nor did he seem angry. He simply looked at his son with calm eyes, as if he already understood everything Jake was going through. "Jake," he said, in a steady voice, "I have a task for you. You won't have to sit in a classroom, and you won't have to take any tests, but I believe if you complete it, you'll find the answer you've been searching for." Robert pulled a small folded piece of paper from his pocket, scribbled with a few names and addresses. He handed it to Jake. On the paper were just 3 names: Anderson, Thomas, Michael. "I want you to meet these 3 old friends of mine. Tell them you're the son of the man with the golden leg. Ask them how they found success. Listen carefully, because Jake, in their stories, you'll discover what you're looking for." Jake held the paper, puzzled. He had never heard his father speak about that strange nickname so seriously before. "The man with the golden leg?" He frowned and immediately asked, "Dad, why do people call you that? Does it mean something special?" Robert only smiled, not answering directly. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You'll understand once you complete this journey. Just trust me. When you listen to them, you'll find the answer for yourself." A surge of curiosity rose inside Jake. This was the first time his father wasn't pushing him to study, wasn't forcing him to be like everyone else. Instead, Robert was giving him a mysterious mission. And Jake, already worn out by school, suddenly felt more excited than ever. The very next morning, Jake packed his things. Not much, just some food, a water flask, and his father's small piece of paper. He felt like he was setting out on an adventure, not to explore the outside world, but to explore himself. As he rode his horse away from the ranch, Jake turned to look back at the house he had always known. His father's gaze followed him from afar, calm as ever, but filled with hope. In that moment, Jake realized this journey wasn't just about answering his own questions, it was also about proving to his father that he could find his own path. The same questions kept echoing in his mind. Who are these 3 people? How did they succeed? And why do they hold the key to my future? He didn't know the answers yet, but one thing was certain. For the very first time in his life, Jake was excited to walk down a road no one had chosen for him. This journey would lead Jake to 3 very different people, 3 powerful stories, and most importantly, a truth about his father that he had never known. A truth that would forever change the way he understood success. Jake began his journey with a mix of nervousness, and curiosity. Each name on his father's list felt like a secret door, and he couldn't wait to discover the stories hidden behind them. The first person Jake went to see was Anderson, who lived just a few miles from the ranch. His house was small but sturdy, and on the front porch hung old photos from sports competitions. When Jake knocked on the door, a strong, broad-shouldered old man appeared. "Who are you?" the man asked, in a deep, warm voice. Jake hesitated for a moment, then answered, "I'm Jake, the son of Robert, the man with the golden leg." At that, Anderson smiled, his eyes lighting up with nostalgia. He invited Jake inside, poured him a glass of water, and slowly began to tell his story. "When I was in school," he began, "I was always near the bottom of the class. If there were 40 students, I'd be number 38 or 39. My teachers had no expectations of me, and my classmates laughed at me. But there was one thing that made me feel alive: running. When my feet hit the ground, I felt free. I knew that this was what I was meant to do." Anderson explained that he spent his entire youth running. The first year, he trained with every ounce of strength he had. The second year, he learned from his mistakes. The third year, he studied technique. And just like that, after 5 years of persistence, he won his very first medal. From then on, one competition after another, he kept stepping onto the winner's podium. "Jake," Anderson said, looking him straight in the eye, "the secret to success isn't grades or intelligence, it's perseverance. When you do something long enough day after day, you become an expert in it. Success is simply the natural result of persistence." Jake left Anderson's house with his heart lifted. For the very first time, he realized that low grades didn't mean failure. What truly mattered was finding what you love and chasing it all the way. The second person on the list was Thomas, the owner of a famous restaurant Jake's family often visited. The moment Jake walked in, the smell of hot, freshly cooked food filled the air. Thomas recognized him instantly and laughed loudly. "Ah, the son of the man with the golden leg. I've been waiting for the day I could tell you this story." Jake sat down, waiting nervously. "When I was in school," Thomas began, "I was even worse than Anderson. Out of 40 students, I ranked 39th. I couldn't make sense of the lessons, and the more I studied, the more exhausted I felt. But I had 2 passions: eating and talking. I loved trying new dishes, loved being in the kitchen experimenting. One day, my friends tasted something I made and said, 'You should open a restaurant.' Thomas followed their advice. In the first year, he opened a small food stall. Hardly anyone came, and he barely made a profit. But because he loved cooking, he kept going every single day. He learned a new recipe, figured out better ways to serve customers, and experimented with how to make food more appealing. 5 years later," Thomas said, his eyes shining, "I opened my first restaurant. And as you can see now, it has grown into an entire chain." Then he leaned forward, his voice serious. "Jake, you don't need to be good at everything. All you need is one skill, one passion. If you stay committed to it, one day, success will surely find you." Jake sat in silence, as if a flame had been lit inside him. He realized that to succeed, you didn't need to know it all. Just one thing you love, pursued with determination, was enough to change your entire life. The last person Jake went to see was Michael. At first, Jake assumed that after Anderson and Thomas, Michael must have been the very last student in class, but to his surprise, Michael had been the very top student. His house was modest, not at all as fancy as Jake had imagined. When Michael opened the door, he greeted Jake with a kind smile and invited him in. Jake introduced himself as usual, then asked, "Sir, what's your secret to success?" Michael gave a soft smile, his eyes distant, almost reflective. "Yes, I was the best student in class. In every subject I was number 1. My grades were always perfect. But you know what? That turned out to be my mistake. Because I studied so broadly, I never went deep into anything. I knew a little bit about everything, but I wasn't truly exceptional at anything. And when I stepped into the real world, I realized I had no single skill I could really rely on." Jake froze, stunned. Those words went against everything he had believed. It turned out being at the top of the class wasn't the only, or even the surest, path to success. He hesitated, then asked softly, "Then, what about my father? Why do people call him the man with the golden leg?" Michael smiled. "Your father, Robert, was actually number 40, the very last in the class. One day, he fell off a horse and broke his leg. To heal, his leg had to be wrapped in golden-colored bandages. From then on, people started calling him by that nickname. But what's more important is this. Despite the injury, despite being underestimated, he never gave up on his love for horses. Step by step, he built a small ranch into the vast estate you see today. He is living proof that success doesn't come from where you rank in class, but from whether you have the perseverance to follow your passion." Jake left Michael's house with his heart overflowing. He had just heard 3 completely different stories: an athlete, a restaurant owner, a top student, and finally his own father. Each one pointed to the same truth. Success doesn't lie in grades, nor in following the crowd. It lies in staying committed to what you truly love. In that moment, Jake felt awakened. He remembered the feeling of freedom when riding across the open fields, the joy of caring for each horse in the ranch. And he finally understood that his dream was never inside a classroom. It was right here, with the animals he loved. On his way home, Jake rode through the wide fields. The sunset stretched across the grasslands, the wind rushing through his hair, and for the first time, he felt lighter than ever. The words of Anderson, Thomas, and Michael echoed in his mind. Perseverance, one skill. Don't get lost in grades. And above all, the story of his father, once the very last in class, yet now a symbol of success in the whole town, struck deep into his heart. Jake suddenly realized, all this time, he had been seeing himself the wrong way. He wasn't useless, and he wasn't a failure. He had simply not yet found the right place to shine. School wasn't his strength, but the ranch, the horses, and the freedom he felt with them, that was his true passion. When he returned home, Jake went straight to his father, no longer hiding, no longer hesitant. With eyes full of determination, he said, "Dad, I finally understand. I don't need to be like my friends. I don't need to follow the path society expects. I want to follow my passion. I want to become a horse trainer, just like you." Robert looked at his son, a warm smile forming on his face. He didn't need to say much. Just a nod was enough. Because he knew Jake had finally found his own path. In that moment, Jake felt the heavy burden he had carried for so long lift from his shoulders. From a confused young man, he had become someone with belief, with clarity, with a goal. Inside him, a new flame had been lit, the flame of passion and perseverance. Jake no longer feared failure, because now he understood that failure was simply part of the journey. And as long as he stayed committed to what he loved, one day, success would surely come. From that day on, Jake was no longer the lost boy he once was. He began spending more and more time at the ranch, learning how to care for the horses, observing how they reacted, and training his skills little by little. At first, nothing was easy. Some horses were stubborn, there were days he failed, and there were times he fell hard. But this time, Jake didn't give up. He remembered Anderson's words. "Day after day, you'll become an expert." He remembered Thomas's lesson. "All you need is one skill. If you stay committed, success will follow." And he held on to Michael's reminder about his father. Grades don't decide your future. Perseverance and passion are the true keys. Piece by piece, those lessons came together into a complete picture. Jake realized that success wasn't some distant destination, but simply the result of a persistent journey. And on that journey, the most important thing was to stay true to himself, his passion, his perseverance, and his belief in who he was. Years later, Jake became one of the best horse trainers in the region. He not only inherited his father's ranch, but expanded it, turning it into a well-known training center. People didn't just come for the horses, they came because they saw in Jake a burning passion, living proof that true success comes from living true to yourself. But Jake's story isn't just for him, it's for all of us. How many times have you felt like you weren't good enough? How many times have you compared yourself to others and thought you'd never measure up? The truth is, success doesn't live on a report card. It isn't decided by society, and it isn't defined by your parents. Success lives within you, in what you love, and in the persistence you're willing to give it. You don't need to be good at everything. You just need one thing that makes your heart come alive. And if you stay with it, practicing every single day, then one day the world will know your name. So ask yourself, what truly makes me happy? What could I do even if no one ever paid me for it? That's the clue to your passion. And if you feel lost right now, remember this. You're not alone. Jake once felt confused, and even his father once failed. But they stood up, found their own path. And you can too. Success isn't about chasing the crowd. Sometimes the ones who dare to walk their own road are the ones who open new paths for the entire world. If this story touched you, share it with a friend or with someone who feels directionless. Who knows? It might be the spark that helps them find their way again. And I want to hear from you. What is your true passion? Have you found it yet? Leave your answer in the comments, because your story might just inspire someone else. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next story, because every story is not just a lesson, it's a reminder that your future begins today.